My name is Ella, and I'm 27 years old. Last year, I moved to Austin, Texas, hoping for a fresh start after a messy breakup. I found a cheap apartment in an older building that seemed perfect for my budget, with only one catch. The landlord told me the basement was off limits. I didn't think much of it at first, figuring it was probably just storage. My neighbor John was odd but harmless, or so I thought. He was in his mid-50s, always wearing the same tattered flannel shirt, and he rarely spoke to anyone. When we did cross paths, he gave me this blank stare that made me uncomfortable, but he never caused any real trouble. He mostly kept to himself, and I figured that was better than a noisy neighbor. One day, curiosity got the better of me. I couldn't stop wondering what was down in that basement. Why would it be off limits? It didn't make sense. So, while John was out and the landlord was nowhere around, I decided to take a quick peek. I found the key hanging on a rusty nail by the laundry room and slowly made my way down the creaky stairs into the basement. It was dark and musty, with old furniture covered in dust and cobwebs. But then, in the far corner of the room, I saw something that made my stomach turn. There were dozens of photos tacked to the walls, photos of people, many of them women. They were blurry and unsettling, but what really struck me was that these people all seemed to be in distress, their faces twisted in fear. Among the photos were news clippings about missing persons, all from the local area. As I read through them, my heart raced. All of the missing people had lived in this building at one time or another. My breath caught in my throat when I saw the date of the most recent disappearance, just 2 months before I moved in. I knew then that something was terribly wrong. I bolted upstairs, terrified and unsure of what to do. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every noise in the building made me jump, and I kept thinking about those photos and the missing people. Around midnight, I heard footsteps outside my door. I froze, listening closely. The footsteps stopped, and then there was a knock. My heart pounded. I knew it was John. I crept to the door, trying to stay as quiet as possible, but he must have heard me. I know he went down there. John's voice was low and calm, but it sent shivers down my spine. "You shouldn't have done that." I didn't respond, trying to steady my breath. Then, without warning, the door handle started to turn. He was trying to get in. I grabbed my phone and called the police, whispering my location as I frantically looked for something to defend myself with. John started pounding on the door, his voice growing more agitated. "I have to cleanse this place. You don't understand." There was no time to wait for the police. I took a deep breath, unlocked the door, and flung it open, catching him off guard. John stumbled forward, and I used the moment to push him down the stairs toward the basement. He tumbled down with a loud thud, and I quickly slammed the basement door shut, locking it from the outside. I backed away, shaking but safe for the moment. The police arrived minutes later and arrested John. As they let him out in handcuffs, he kept mumbling about spirits and needing to rid the building of evil. It was clear he wasn't just strange, he was dangerous. The investigation revealed that John had been responsible for the disappearances of multiple tenants. He believed they were possessed by evil spirits and had been cleansing them. The police found evidence in the basement. John had killed those tenants, and I had come far too close to being his next victim. I moved out the next day, leaving behind that horrifying chapter of my life. But I still can't shake the memory of those photos or the sound of John's footsteps outside my door that night. My name is Tim, and I'm 32 years old. A few months ago, I moved to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, for a new job as a software engineer. I found a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood, and everything seemed fine, until I met my neighbor, Karen. Karen lived across the hall. She was in her late 40s and seemed friendly at first, but quickly became overbearing. Every time I left my apartment, she'd be there, asking me odd questions about my schedule, meals, or just standing too close for comfort. I thought maybe she was lonely, but things got weirder. One night, Karen started knocking on my door around midnight, claiming she heard strange noises, scratching, whispers, and banging. I didn't hear anything and told her it was probably just the building settling, but she seemed convinced something was wrong. It didn't stop there. Karen began standing outside my window, staring into my apartment for hours. My unit was on the ground floor, so it was easy for her to look in. I tried closing the curtains, but the next day, I'd find them open again. I decided to confront her. I told her she was making me uncomfortable and asked her to stop with the late-night knocking and staring. She just laughed it off, saying she was only trying to protect me. "There are things you don't know about this building," she said in a serious tone. After that, I started locking my door more carefully. But one night, after returning from work, I noticed my apartment door was unlocked. My heart pounded as I stepped inside. My belongings were scattered everywhere, and there, in the middle of the room, was Karen. She was sitting on the floor, going through my things like it was the most normal thing in the world. "What are you doing here?" I demanded. Karen looked up at me with a calm smile. "I'm protecting you," she whispered. I had to make sure they weren't here. I was terrified and furious. I grabbed my phone and threatened to call the police. She didn't seem bothered. She just stood up, muttered something about needing to keep me safe, and walked out as if nothing had happened. That night, I barely slept. I kept the door bolted and stayed awake, listening for any sound that might indicate Karen had returned. A few days later, I heard the police had been called to Karen's apartment. She hadn't been seen in days, and the landlord found her dead. She had taken her own life, leaving behind a suicide note. The note was disturbing. Karen wrote about hearing voices, voices that told her to do strange things, voices she believed were coming from the walls of our building. She mentioned me in the note, saying she had been trying to protect me from the voices, that they were after me next. It sent chills down my spine. I moved out of the apartment shortly after Karen's death. I couldn't stay there, knowing what had happened. But even now, every time I hear a creak or a faint noise in the night, I can't help but wonder if Karen was right. If something had been there all along, whispering through the walls, just waiting for me to let my guard down. My name is Aaron. I'm 32, and I live in Chicago, Illinois. I've always been quiet, keeping to myself in the apartment complex where I've lived for 5 years. But I knew all the faces in the building, especially Greg, a middle-aged guy who was overly friendly, especially with the kids in the neighborhood. He would always offer to babysit and seemed like a decent guy, but something about him made me uneasy. One evening, everything changed. A child went missing. A little girl named Lily who lived down the hall. The entire neighborhood was in chaos. People were out searching the streets, calling her name, while the police knocked on doors, asking if anyone had seen her. I remembered seeing Lily earlier that day, playing outside. I also remembered seeing her enter Greg's apartment. When the police came by, Greg answered calmly, telling them he had no idea where Lily was. He smiled, acting like nothing was wrong. But I knew something wasn't right. My gut told me to dig deeper. Later that night, when things quieted down, I decided to confront him. I knocked on Greg's door, and when he opened it, I asked him directly, "I saw Lily come in here earlier. Where is she?" His face went pale. He stammered, "You must be mistaken. She left hours ago." I didn't believe him for a second. His calm demeanor cracked, and I could see panic in his eyes. Without thinking, I pushed past him into the apartment. He tried to stop me, but I was determined. I searched the place frantically, and when I reached the basement door, I knew I had found something terrible. The basement was hidden behind an old bookshelf, and when I pried it open, my stomach churned. Inside, I found children's toys scattered everywhere, small clothes folded in piles, and photos. Photos of missing children, including Lily. The basement was soundproofed, the perfect place to hide someone. Just then, Greg lunged at me, but I fought him off and called the police. When they arrived, Greg tried to flee, but they caught him before he could escape. The horror didn't end there. They dug up his backyard and found shallow graves containing the remains of children who had been missing for years. Greg had been abducting kids and killing them, right under our noses. I can still hear the cries of the parents who finally learned what happened to their children. It's something I'll never forget.